All right, this purpose of this lecture is on public information officer, and we want to learn is to how to establish a guideline for the fire department's flow of information between the department, the news media, and the general public. The action we'll cover in this part will be the department's public information officer, as well as fire department personnel who operate at any fire department scene or event. With the ability to deviate from the guidelines lies within the fire chief who is appointed designee. The fire department recognizes the need to deal effectively with the general public and the media. The fire department will strive to provide correct and factual information to the public and news media in a timely and impartial manner. What are the responsibilities of the public information officer? The PIO, Public Information Officer, is responsible for coordinating the flow of information concerning departmental policies and operations on specific statements concerning issues that could arise concerning the department. The PIO will act as a main source of media contacts. The incident commander may be responsible for the release of the news information at the scene of emergency, but at no time will the emergency operation be compromised for the release of the news information. In the event of an extremely newsworthy incident, the incident commander will notify dispatch, the communications center, and have a PIO, Public Information Officer, dispatched to the scene. Dispatch will notify the PIO and immediately advise him or her of the situation. A PIO will report to the scene of all major incidents and coordinate all media information. As I was mentioning, the PIO gets dispatched to all major incidents. Now let's look at those major incidents and see what they are. Any multi-alarm fire incident involving industrial or commercial occupancy. Fire incidents involving fatalities or serious injuries. Any incident involving multiple fatalities or serious injuries. A major hazardous material emergency or another incident requiring major evacuation. Extended or complicated rescue operations. Any incident involving death or seriously to the fire department personnel. All serious accidents involving fire vehicles that result in injury or fatalities to civilians or fire personnel. Serious aircraft or railroad accidents. And the PIO, along with the chief and the safety officer, are to be notified at any time when the supply lines, that's when additional lines are being laid out to a fire situation. Once the PIO gets dispatched, he'll respond to the incident commander command post and confer with the incident commander on all the information that needs to be released. There are times in certain situations where the media would like to talk to the first responder firsthand. Only via the chain of command can the PIO get that release information from the incident commander so that first responder could go talk to the media. But it must be done completely following the chain of command. It is up to the department to make sure to maintain the chain of command at all situations. We don't have to have the firefighters explaining to the public what the situation was, what occurred. We got to train our firefighters to be careful when we're talking to the public, where we're talking to the public, and when we're talking to the public. We don't need unpertinent information being released to the media without PIO and the chief of the department knowing it. The PIO will obtain approval through the fire chief prior to the release of information on internal investigations, personnel matters, and citizen complaints to the fire personnel or media representatives. Incident Command and a Public Information Officer. The Incident Commander shall be responsible for management of the public information on the fire ground. Any major incident likely to attract news media shall be brought to the attention of the PIO by the Incident Commander. As I mentioned before, and once the thing starts happening, Incident Command should be notifying the PIO. When practical, the Incident Commander shall establish a media sector and advise central office or central dispatch of this location, and then they will turn it over to the news media. So all the news cameras and all the reporters go to one location, not to the fire scene, and interrupt the operation. The Incident Commander can request that this be done via media page and a group of media faxes. At a multi-jurisdiction agency incident, the agency having primary jurisdiction will be responsible for the coordination and release of information to the media. Members of the media will often respond to a scene that normally would not require the presence of a PIO. In such case, the incident commander should be prepared to provide a media briefing as soon as the command responsibilities permit. Once your department establishes a PIO officer, they should have what is called the Information Release Guidelines. And these guidelines will help you dictate what gets told to the media. Information released into the media should relate only to the facts of the incident. No determination as to the cause of the incident shall be released. Questions relating to the cause shall be referred to the appropriate investigation agency. Some agencies have the local fire marshal, some have county fire marshal, county arson squads, some have the state police. All those questions will go to them directly. Under no circumstances should the names of fatalities or the injured persons be released unless authorized by the PIO or appropriate investigation or agency. You don't want the media releasing people's names without next of kin or relatives finding out that there's been an injury or a serious death. At no time should fire department personnel information be provided to the news media. All requests for such information shall be immediately referred to the PIO via the chain of command. We don't want to put this out there that so-and-so has been a member of 20 years and his career is all about. We don't want that information out yet unless it goes up the chain of command and the chief of department says, yes, you can do that. When the opinion of the incident commander at an incident results in what may be potentially controversial situation, the PIO will be notified immediately. So if there's something going on, the incident commander thinks that it's going to be pretty newsworthy, you must notify the PIO and start setting up your operations right away. If a representative of the news media is requesting interviews on information from the department personnel at any time other than as described in the above situations, the request shall be referred to the PIO and to the chain of command. So if they're coming to the firehouse, knocking on the door, saying we want this information, call your PIO officer or get your chief of department there to answer their questions. Also, all we got to start talking about is on radio communications. When do we start talking, releasing names and saying victims' names over the radio? That has to be stopped also. So the PIO is going to have to get up involved with the department procedures on radio communications. This information is important. We do not want that stuff being transmitted over the radio because the news media has radios in their cars and vehicles. The public has radios at home. We don't want that information about personnel matters over the radio. Do not release the following information. The identity of victims of a sex crime. If you're doing EMS work, your fire department's doing EMS work, and you get involved with a sex crime, don't release the name of the victim over to the news media. Identity of a juvenile suspect. You don't want the names of a juvenile under 17, 18 years old out in the paper. The identity of other identifying informations. There's a captain of the football team or a cheerleader. We don't want that information brought out. Any attempted suicides, we don't want that information being brought out to the media. Standard operation procedures were written for emergency response or pre-fire action plans. We don't want to be giving them out to the media because that's our information. If they get the media, they could try and use it against us in lawsuits. So we got to make sure that stuff stays within the fire department. And information on suspects who have been interviewed but not charged. There have been times where you go out and you start doing your investigation and you're talking to all the citizens. They're not being charged for any crime. You're just trying to get your information on this fire. Do not give out those names to the public or to the news media. The public does not need to know who those people are. The release of names and identifiable biographical information of victims, including minors, is not restricted. No information on the identity of any critical injured or deceased person shall be made prior to notification of the next of kin. This is stuff that we have to keep to ourselves until we be able to get to the next of kin and to the person other people in the family. We don't want the media to get all these names. Individuals' identifiable health information obtained by fire department is confidential. That's under the HIPAA laws. We can't be going out telling everybody about so-and-so, one of the patients, their medical problems. By law, we cannot do that. And the release of names of deceased persons shall be handled by the primary responders. If the police department, let them go and handle and tell them, notify the next of kin that there's been a death in a fire or death by an accident, whatever the case may be. It is very important that the PIO, as a designee, very early on makes arrangements to guide the media to vantage points to safely get coverage without interfering with emergency operation. Failure to do will result in freelancing by the media. And we have numerous times where you turn around, you have the media's coverage areas set up down a block, and the media sneaking in to get good footage. You need to set up a good relationship and show them this is the area we'll be setting up, having news conferences and news briefs. In a large-scale operation, it may require that the media sector be set up in a staging area or other locations where transportation to the incident site can be arranged by the PIO. We might be using city buses to have them down a block if it's a large-scale incident. We don't need them coming up there by, say, a hazmat incident. We'll have the buses, we'll have the media sector set up down a road. We'll have buses transport them back and forth. That's all set up by the PIO. At a scene of an event of a public interest, representatives of the news media will be permitted to conduct interviews, take photographs, otherwise perform their assigned tasks, provided that the actions are not in violation of the guidelines that you have established in your department's SOGs, and provide such activities not interfere with the fire department operations. So you can allow them to do on certain things, just as long as they're not interfering with our operation. And photographs and videotapes may be taken from areas where the news media have been given access by the incident commander and the PIO. Once they deem it's okay, then they can actually start setting up and taking pictures with their cameras and video machines. Area of access for news representatives on a scene of an incident will include any areas open to the public. Any designated area set aside for news media's briefings. You have to have a certain area where the briefings are being occurred. And any area to which the news media representatives are provided guided access by the PIO, incident commander, or his designee. News media representatives shall be permitted to interview victims of an incident who have consented to such interviews provided. So if the public person says yes, he'll be interviewed, then the news media can interview that to the public. The victim is not undergoing medical attention. If the person is not on medicines and is coherent and can talk, the PIO should grant them privilege to talk to the media. The victim appears to be able to make sound decisions, once again, be able to talk, and is not upset, severely injured or emotionally distraught. The last thing you need is a person with a bloody bandage just hanging out all over the place and the news media talking to them. If the victim desires not to be interviewed, the media representative should be advised. So if the public says, look, I don't want to be involved with this, I don't want to be interviewed, the PIO is responsible to tell the news media that there was not going to be any interviews today with this victim.
We've talked so far about public information, the role of the public information officer, and the importance of public information at a scene. What we want to talk about now is more along the strategic planning side. How do we plan for and address the needs of the media and the needs for distributing information during time of crisis? Message mapping is the process that we're going to talk about. It's the process of creating a playbook so that we have a strategic plan of how we're going to collect data, process data, and issue verified, validated information to media and other stakeholders. As first responders, we do quite a bit to prepare for a response. We do drills, we go to classes, we study, we process scene management so that we understand what we might face in time of crisis. The same thing for public information. The emergency management discipline requires that we focus on building strategic plans to address the concerns that we're going to face in time of crisis. Public information officers do the same thing. They have to plan and prepare for what they could expect as far as media inquiries and other stakeholder requests for information during an emergency. The first thing, obviously, is to define who are stakeholders. We can look at YouTube or any online video and find examples of where public information has gone awry. The officer who is not prepared at the time for requests for information from the media or is bombarded by media with hundreds of questions in 3-second time span. We also can find really good examples of personnel who are well-trained, who had the answers before they ever got in front of the media, because they knew what data they needed to collect. And we're going to go over some steps so that we can plan for and build almost a script of what information is needed or how to go about collecting the information so that we can get the information and get the story out to the media, meet their deadlines, and meet our operational requirements. Because remember, the media can also be used to help us manage the scene and the community's reaction to crisis. Who are some of the stakeholders in public information? The responders and their families. Families want to know what's going on. The larger the incident, the more disconnected families may feel from their loved ones, so they're going to want data. Regulatory agencies who are going to want to know what's going on and in what time frame. Citizen groups who feel that they have a stake in what's going on, obviously either the economy of the community or somehow they're involved or feel they're involved in the incident. Whether you believe they are or not is not important, it's their perception. Media, parents, especially where children are involved in environments that they believed were safe. Parents, for example, responding to schools because they heard school may have had a lockdown, or because they might have heard of a fire at a school when it was simply an alarm system. Having a methodology to deliver that information to the parents so that they're less stressed arriving at the scene will only make your job better. Public in general has a need for information, especially if we start managing traffic control routes or we look at disrupted community activities. And the last, obviously, is elected leadership. Policymakers and elected leadership want to know what their personnel are doing because they're also getting questions from people. They're getting phone calls and need to know how to effectively respond. A strategic planning tool for public information officers is message mapping. It provides an integrated structure to determine what information is needed and the process for collecting it. It also has core content already developed prior to the incident in a calm environment so that we can control the message that we're putting out, watch the words that we're using, and be more clear and concise in our delivery. We provide the PIO with a process for strategic development of the message that we want to send out. We then can interact with the PIO at a time before an incident when we have the time to research, to analyze, to practice together so that the PIO and the command officers are prepared for media or onslaught of all the stakeholders asking for information when you're trying to manage operations. I do want to point out that much of the information that I'm providing was created, message mapping as a concept was created by Vincent Coviello, who is a PhD out of the Center for Risk Communications in New York City. Additional information can be found at the center's website. There are 3 goals to message mapping: to organize information in an easily understood process, to make sure that we have a framework that is understood by all, to express the current organizational viewpoints, to focus on important issues and questions and concerns, particularly the concerns of the incident commander. And the third is to promote open dialogue, both inside and outside the organization. Part of the thing we have to remember is in many jurisdictions, the PIO may not be from your town, may not be from your department. Particularly as incidents grow in size and become more regional, public information might be a shared responsibility or it might be delegated to different jurisdictional authorities. So using the message map format, let's think about a standard house fire. You're responding at 3 o'clock in the morning to a structure fire, standard residential structure, and so we're going to create the map for residential structure fire. The title of the map might be single family dwelling, residential fire, initial suppression. So we know that the time frame for this is during that initial period of response and suppression. And don't think media may not show up at that same time you're arriving. It may happen. The stakeholders for this are the general public, people who are going to be seeing this first thing in the morning, the elected leadership maybe who's going to want information on your response and what we did, particularly as council members or solicitors show up at 3 in the morning because they live nearby. Questions or concerns, well, What are the first concerns in a standard structure, residential structure? How many apparatus do you have on scene? They may ask you, did everyone get out okay? Have you contacted anyone to help these people because now they're displaced? Are they even displaced? How many children were involved? These are some of the questions that may come up. One of the other concerns that might come up is this a key influencer in your community? Is it the mayor's house? Is it a board member of one of the boards, the influential boards on your city council? These are all questions that should be there and be prepared for. Next is the overarching message. What is the overarching 27 words? What's the overarching message? Well, City Fire Department responded to this alarm at 3 a.m. Everyone was evacuated. No fatalities. We're in suppression operations now. You're within 27 words. You've gotten all the points that you needed to get out. 3 critical elements that you then can message map further on. Key message number 1 that I said is we responded because obviously, and especially in a small community, the amount of time it took you to get to that scene is critical. Department responded within 3 minutes to the alarm. It's a good message. The second message is that everyone was evacuated and there were no injuries. Not as critical as the first, certainly an important message. You may argue whether that should be the last message or the middle message. The third message is the City Fire Department is involved in suppression operations now, and we anticipate that the fire will be under control shortly. We're active and involved, and we're here, are the messages, the points that you're giving out in that one. Your supporting facts can come from the job itself. When you first arrived, obviously, as you're doing your size up, you're going to determine what was the occupancy and is the occupancy evacuated. You're going to initiate rescue and suppression operations as critical responsibilities on that initial response. And you're going to collect that data at your command post or the back of your vehicle so that you have this information prepared for whatever media is coming along. Imagine if you have a form to write this information down or a cue card and to be able to hand that off to an officer or individual that can handle the media for you, that is trained to handle the media for you. The collection of that information is that simple and that quick. What you see on this slide is a standard format for building a message map. You can see across the top we want to put what the overall map is for, what is the topic we're trying to address. Following that, we'll title the map so that we know not just what it's for, but we'll know at what time frame. We'll see then the stakeholders, who is it that we're trying to address, and we'll also address questions and concerns that might come up. This is important. We know what types of questions media might ask. We know, for example, they might want to know the number of apparatus responded, what alarm is the fire, how many people are displaced or involved, was anyone killed or injured, what time was it dispatched. We can build those general questions or concerns right there so that we know why we've focused on these 3 key messages below. Next, you'll see the key message points, 1, 2, and 3. Key message number 1 is the most important message that we want to get out. Remember that each of these 3 messages are going to be broken into 9-second sound bites, 27 words. That's very important to remember. 9 seconds and 27 words for each of these messages. That's the time that you have to get your point across. The first message is going to be the most important. The second message will be the least important, and the third message will be the second most important. Why? So that we're leaving them with information and we're leaving them with a focus following the interview or following the announcement. You'll see that right before that, we're going to put our supporting information. What facts do we know? And again, these are validated, verified facts that we know that we want to get across or that created the message. The supporting information facts also below that, make sure that that information is there because as the media asks you questions, you want to get back on message. And the way to do that is to know what it is you want to deliver and also the supporting facts that go with each of the messages so that as questions are asked, you are able to follow up with individual media inquiries or concerns. Why 9 seconds, 27 words? Well, quite simply, it's because anything more than that is subject to edit. You need to get your point out within those 9 seconds and 27 words or run the risk of the important part of your message being edited for time constraints within the story when it runs on the local news. This reinforces why we're doing this message mapping. 9 seconds, 27 words is a very limited space to get your major points across. By practicing and building this strategic message and this process, we'll be able to do that and you'll be ahead of the game. To be more specific on this format, the title of the map is to address what it is we're focusing on. Also, though, the timing. When is it best to issue this message? When are we focused on these 3 points? The second thing is stakeholders. We really do need to understand who our stakeholders will be for this message so that we can build the message according to who the receiver is. Remember, most people don't do fire suppression or rescue operations and have no idea of the terminology we may use. So it gives us an opportunity to select our terminology based on the receiver, not the sender of the message. Questions and concerns is the other section that discusses the data sources that the audience may want. It also focuses on predictability. We really do know, and you can research online, the 100 standard questions that a journalist will ask, so that we know which of these questions may come relevant in time of an emergency, whether it be a car accident, a fire, a flood, whatever response operation we're involved in. There's a series of standard questions that the media is going to want to know. We could build message maps to address those common requests. Under questions and concerns, we could identify subject matter experts to help us collect or have information stored and prepared. A good example would be, in a pandemic emergency, public health can assist us in building our message maps if our EMS service is going to be involved in transporting those that are ill or reported with flu-like symptoms so that we can start to assist in getting the information out. Also, it allows us to sort our concerns into manageable chunks, and that's very important. We're building messages that are concise, brief, and clear to the point. We want to develop 3 key elements or points of information for conciseness. We want to deliver each of these in no more than 9 seconds, and we want to make sure that we use no more than 27 words for the entire set of messages. They need to be written to a 6th or 8th grade level so that we make sure that what we're sending out as information is readily and easily understood. For example, if we can build a message map for a fatality at a fire, we know the media is going to want to know the name of the individual, which we just learned we don't want to give out, but they're still going to want information. We know that they're going to want to know the age of the individual or relative age. What were the conditions or environment that the individual might have expired? We know that they're going to ask who rescued the individual, what were the circumstances around that. They're looking for a story, they're looking for information. No comment doesn't work. As a matter of fact, no comment will simply extend the period that they're seeking information. So let's have managed, controlled information available. We know that an individual passed away in the fire. We are researching now the individual's name and identity. The individual's age appears to be elderly woman, young child, whatever, ballpark. And you may not want to issue that information. That is subjective to your community. We know that we can say, yes, she was rescued by this fire department or the other fire department. We know that we can say EMS worked heroically on the individual, but unfortunately was not able to revive the individual, or is currently working on the individual and she's being transported to the hospital as we speak, whatever the situation calls for. Very concise, very specific, and the points we want to get out is individuals rescued or recovered, what are we doing with them now, and who are the individuals that address them. I want to leave you with 2 thoughts. The first is, in an emergency, our future as responders may hang on a few words provided by someone in authority as we face a fateful decision. This was said by risk communication expert Barchoff, Fishoff of the Washington Post, and they're never truer words. The second thought that I want to leave you with, the media is a distribution system. They need to collect information and send it out to the public. Content is important to them. We want to make sure that we partner with the media, preferably before an event, to make sure that that trust and bond is there so that we can give them informed, validated information, and they don't go seek information from alternate sources which may or may not be credible to them or to us. We've talked an awful lot about standard operating guidelines for public information. We've talked about the strategic planning that goes on in delivering information. How do we pick a PIO? Well, it's actually a really good question. Picking a public information officer is not like picking someone to make entry. Public information officers have to be specifically trained to deliver the message we want delivered and deliver the information that we need delivered in a manner that projects authority, responsibility, and integrity. We need a public information officer that looks the part, but we also need one that is well trained in understanding what the media's needs are, what all the stakeholders' needs are, and how to build these message maps, how to look for this strategic information. In some jurisdictions, the public information officer for all departments comes out of the administrator or mayor's office. In other jurisdictions, each department may have their own public information officer. In smaller towns, it may be the chief that handles all those functions. The fact of the matter is we need to understand that if we're taking the role of public information officer, then we need to take the training and build an understanding so that when we're in front of the camera or when we're addressing the community, we're doing so with integrity and honesty, we're doing it with authority, and we're projecting that confidence that's needed so that the public feels good about the information being provided is real and factual. I would focus on a public information officer from all emergency operations that has experience in front of a camera, that has maybe had experience in talking to community organizations. Public speakers are available. You may have public speakers in your community that are educators, that are politicians, that are retired and looking for a role to stay involved in their community. You may have firefighters that are well trained. The point of the matter is to find an individual that meets those three criteria, that has an understanding of the environment that you're operating within as firefighters and as fire leadership, and also understands the other side, the needs of the media and the stakeholders for information, and can work that balance so that we're getting good information out, we're keeping the public and the stakeholders informed as we need to, and at the same time, we're not interfering with operations and blocking our success at emergencies. It is important to point out that under the incident command system, the public information officer, whether he's operating out of the mayor's office, whether he is the mayor, whether he's operating out of a joint information center, or out of an emergency operations center, or even on the fire grounds, the public information officer is part of the command staff. His message and his activities are accountable to the incident commander on scene. That has to be. The IC has to control the messages that are going out to make sure that they're verified and factual, also to look for trends and patterns of the information that's being requested. Whether you're a small or large department, situation may even dictate that you have a public information officer. You may not have a career seasoned trained information officer available, but you want someone to address the media and to delegate that responsibility as command staff off to an information officer. What do you do? Well, it really starts before the event like any operation. You may have a firefighter that is directly from central casting. The perfect build, the helmet looks just right tilted, whatever. They're right out of central casting. They're not formally trained. You may not use them all the time. Where can you go get training? There's a variety of places. Your Office of Emergency Management at the state or county level may have training courses available for public information officers. FEMA has courses available through the National Emergency Training Center. There's also online curriculums that are available to assist you in building that confidence in front of the camera and how to work with and affect communications for your department.